Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to the 15-minute Free Thinking Podcast. For those who don't know, my name is Carpo. These are available on all the podcast platforms, as well as some of them in video form, which I am doing here, as you can plainly hear or see. And today's topic surrounds a subject that came to me by chance today. It's something that I've contemplated many times before and think about a lot in life, but sometimes those very simplistic ideas are the very ones that we tend to ignore or take for granted. And it started with watching a couple of OPB shows, Oregon Public Broadcasting. I like watching their nature shows and their little 10-minute segments about various issues and concerns of people. Yeah, I'm a hippie. What can I say? So there was one, it was about a Vancouver Island in BC. Vancouver Island is a lot bigger than just an island. It's a huge wooded area, and it has some of the last standing old growth. I live in Washington State. Now we have amazing forests up here. The Olympics create their own weather system. It's so moist there that it's unlikely to ever burn down. It's like the lungs of the state, if you will. And all of this said, we've learned a lot about nature, a lot about trees. I'm not going to go too much into this because this video is more about passions. It's more about finding yourself, but it's important to cover this. As I saw all of these people protesting who had been setting up in the woods and in the trees, my first thought was, these are, amazing people who are dedicating their time to saving these things and these forests and trying to save some of the last old growth. But then there were the other part of my mind which said a lot of people watching this are just thinking, oh, a bunch of tree huggers standing in the way of progress. We need timber. Now, both can be true at the same time. Sure, a lot of people try to stop progress. They don't want any logging at all, but a majority of people support logging still. But just realize that some of these last stands, the way that they clear cut these forests, they cut down the nurse trees, they destroy the mycorrhizal relationship with the fungi, and everything falls apart once the fungus falls apart and is unable to connect with the trees in the forest. It's the brain of the earth. And these are all things we've learned in the last few decades. We didn't really understand the depth of the relationship. Oh, we knew it. People have always known it, but until science told us, hey, if you cut down the biggest trees, you're cutting down the nurse trees. So these people have a passion for what they're doing, and I envy them for that, because I'd love to be out there and doing something like that. But I realized it reminded me of many discussions I've had where people want me to take up their causes. Now, you can support a cause and say, I stand by you in what you're doing, but also maybe not have the means or the ability to do it. For example, if you're raising kids and you have a job and you're trying to make ends meet, you can't just pick up and move out to the woods and just camp out to defend trees. It's not on the top of your priority list. And maybe that's why people revere it so much. Here's the thing. This is more about what, later on in the morning, my son, he's 26, and he said something to the effect of, he didn't want life to pass him by. He wants to take action. He's action-oriented. He goes out, he plays music. He has been playing Grateful Dead covers with a band, and he's organized. He plays all the time. He practices all the time. He has a job. He's living life. But in his mind, he feels like there's more he should be doing. And I realize that angst is something that so many people carry, and that it's not just based on youth. If you see some of the passions people have for standing up for the environment, as I said before, they're all age groups, because these aren't things that ever really leave you. My father raised me with a passion for the outdoors, which is why I use that one. I highly respect nature because we are nature. It's not separate in my mind. My father would take me out to the high desert, and if you even dropped a wrapper on accident, it was, hey, litter bugs. He couldn't stand litter bugs. And he was all about pack it in, pack it out. And he taught me these values, these simple values, which I've carried to the modern day. Not even a cigarette butt. I don't throw garbage on the ground. It's disgusting. And so many people do it, so nonchalant, and don't even care. So part of my passion has always been preservation of nature, and it seems pretty basic. But so you see this poster behind me. It says "Save the Eagle." My father passed away when I was 15. It was about 1991, so it's been about 30 years. He always had this hanging on the wall. And I wanted to make the point that in 1963, there were only, I believe, 413 or 417 known breeding pair of bald eagles in the United States. And therefore, the Conservancy efforts, this was a Miller version, but everybody was trying to save the bald eagle. In the year 2000, they were taken off the endangered species list, and at that time, there were 10,000 known breeding pair. You can't drive up and down the Columbia Gorge without seeing bald eagles. The point is, it wasn't always this way, but enough passionate people stood up for the fact that we need to preserve these amazing animals. And it blows me away that so many people would shoot at them in the first place. Birds of prey have always been useful for farmers and others. I don't understand why so many people would shoot the American symbol of freedom, if you will. But yeah, from 417 breeding pair to 10,000. And today, it's been 13 more years. I'm sure there are plenty more. They are everywhere out there. So, to get into the passion part, sorry for making such a long, headway to get there. But a passion for nature is something I think many people share. But back to the life passing us by, as I mentioned that. That feeling is important. It's just like the feeling of stress. And the feeling of stress, as people will point out, helps us motivate. It helps us to function. It helps us to get through life. If you don't stress, you don't know what you need to get accomplished. Stress can be a savior, but it can also destroy you if you stress over pointless things. Well, the feeling of life passing you by, if you become overly obsessed, some people could get into some really, really, let's just say, bad passions, bad habits, things that they shouldn't do. And drugs are one of those, because people are trying to latch on to something that's meaningful, and if they can't find it, drugs are often that answer. So the problem with this is that apathy and comfort also result in this lack of a will to succeed in life. And I'm not talking about financial success. I'm talking about feeling in your heart and your mind that you are accomplishing something that means something to you. Having purpose, it's something that is underestimated. Not just working or just making money or just living, but having a purpose, something that you find important. So apathy and comfort, like we have in the West, it reduces the will to push forward. It's like many people know, if you have all the comforts, why work harder? Well, because there's part of us that always pushes us. We know we want to do something. We want projects. So we want to find a passion, and I think that we get stuck in one, and sometimes people don't know how to change. I have several. I'm perhaps to a fault too interested in too many different things. And that helps me to enjoy life in many different angles, but at the same time, I can't stick with one thing long enough. I might come back to it. I just go with what feels right, and I think that's important. But there's also the sense of urgency, that life is short, that you can't just mosey along without feeling in the back of your mind like you should be doing more. And I guess my message here is mostly aimed at the younger generations. To slap yourself really and get off your ass when you don't want to do the things that are hard to do. I've been more apathetic over the last couple of years, but I've worked my ass off in when I've worked for employers, whether I'm roofing, doing construction, working on a conveyor belt. I've always had this pride in my work, but and it does give you a sense of purpose, but we always want something more than that, something that's ours, not just working for someone else, or even not just working for ourselves. I've started my own businesses too. It just doesn't fulfill something in our minds and in our hearts. Healthy passions are important. So I guess the goal would be to find passions that move you and find a way to be financially successful off of that. That's the most difficult part, because often the passions don't make money. It's the starving artist syndrome, if you will. I think one way we can learn more about it is, well, a lot of people use the term disassociative with taking certain things, certain psychedelics, or certain, but more like special K, or let's just say drugs or substances that pull a person away from reality and allow them to kind of dream in their own mind. I guess dimethyltryptamine is very similar to that in the right dose. But as a direct counter to the term disassociative, there's magnassociative, right? It's kind of the way I see psychedelics, seeing closer, seeing yourself. And there's a term for it. It's called autoscopy, or autoscopy is how it's written. And scope is to see, and auto is, it means seeing yourself from the outside. And not just a literal, being outside your body or an out-of-body experience, but really being able to stand outside yourself and see your drives and your motivations, which helps you to figure out what you're actually motivated to do and what moves you. And there will be times where it's hard. There will be times where you might be lazy for a while. There will be times when you won't be as focused. But pushing through that is crucial, and especially for the younger generation. Something that's completely, there's a term called metanoia. It's basically changing your mind. And there's so many people who are fearful to change their mind. You have to be constantly adapting to the surroundings. You can't just stick with one way of thinking your whole life. It's very difficult. And there's a term that I came up with. It was homolysis or homolysis, right? And as far as I know, it's not a word, but homo meaning man and lysis meaning separation or to loosen. And it's basically my version of a Latin phrase meaning to loosen humans or separate one another. And for some reason, we very much love that. We love to separate ourselves, but we also love to have community. There's like this, yin and yang of the us and them attitude, but always needing an us, you know what I mean? And therefore, passions for people can get so wrapped up in a group and groupthink about what they are, love and what they do, that they basically can block out the world. Think about knitting circles, things like that. They don't care what's going on. Well, there may be a lot of gossip in there. In fact, when Bush was president, the Secret Service, or the CIA, I think, put special operatives, maybe it was the FBI, into actual sewing circles with old ladies to hear what they were talking about as far as how they felt about the war. As far as I know, it's true. It was a pretty crazy time back then, but hey, it's not changed today. And that brings me maybe to the fact that a lot of the passions people have today is exposing that kind of stuff. For example, the truther type passions. I have a passion for knowledge, but I can't have such a passion that I'm obsessed with all the negative news, and it's very difficult to balance that, because most of what we get is a bunch of bullshit. Trying for homolysis, trying to separate humans from one another, because it pays. It always has paid. Well, besides all that, there's not a lot else I really wanted to say here. I guess my main point, to kind of sum it up here, is to find something that moves you as best you can. But don't think that you're ever going to achieve some sort of a perfect enlightened state. I firmly believe that if that is attainable, to where a person could just say, I've found my happiness, I don't know how that's possible. Even a person who, let's say, is given enough money to live the rest of their life in comfort, why do they always fuck it up, right? Why do we have such an issue with maintaining ourselves throughout life on a straight and narrow, normal path? Because as humans, we are curious. We are creative. We want to branch out. We want to try new things. If we've never had that sports car, we win $1 million, we want to buy that sports car. You can't fault humans for being curious. I mean, For tens of thousands of years, we've done the best we could. And then all of a sudden, over a few centuries, we are all living like kings and queens. And because of this, and unfortunately, because I realized that the next generation coming up doesn't have those same benefits, I saw a discussion about how whether the boomer generation was to blame for all the woes, and how many young people want to blame the boomers, when the boomers were really just living the same game that any other generation would live if they could. Hey, you've got everything you need right in front of you. You might not realize that, in the future it's going to come back to haunt all of us because of the way that we've dealt with our world, which is why I think a passion for nature, a passion for preservation, conservation is important. But not everyone has that. But I would say that that's the one thing that the younger generation shares for the most part. They see the world getting all fucked up around them and they don't know what to do about it. They see that they're going to owe huge school, the school debt on top of the credit card debt and the crushing rent these days, on top of the fact that nobody is going to be able to buy houses anymore. And that all gets into the horrible collapse of the economy, which is a whole different story. But my point there is that if people feel defeated, if the younger generation feels defeated, then they don't have the passion. They won't have the drive to succeed. So if you want to point the finger and say, oh, why don't these people want to start these great companies and do what we did in my generation? Well, probably because all of the larger companies squeeze them out because people are ordering Amazon Prime every day and making them billions richer while mom and pop companies go out of business. Everybody talks big about giving a shit, but they go from the easiest, most convenient thing. Go to Walmart, buy the cheapest, crappiest, foreign-made stuff where the people don't get paid. It's the world we live in, and it's defeated. That's why so many people, I believe in the boomer generation, could have those passions. They saw American-made goods. They could go to a factory and actually hand-make things, not just put a piece in something, send it out, and then have it sent back, then send it out, because people don't want to live like machinery. And I think this is important because if we want to have the same passions to preserve our future, then we have to look at the bigger picture, and I don't think people really are, and those who are just being laughed at and ignored. So I do sympathize with the younger generation when they complain about, where to go from here. I'm 45 and I feel that way. But let's just say that feeling never goes away. There's a feeling in the back of our minds that it's always a little bit uncomfortable, and that's the way I believe it always should be. I firmly do. Because it's part of what makes us human. Let me know your thoughts, and I appreciate you all coming along. I'll finish up the rest of this on the podcast version. Thanks for watching.